Okay, with that said, our last item, we've only been on it for 3.5 hours. So yeah, I mean, our record is 5 hours, so we still have 1.5 hours to go. Item 8, fiscal year 2021 Traffic and Mobility Commission work plan.
Thank you, Chair Gokin. I would like to introduce our Chief Officer, David Graham. He will be here with us. We've invited him back for another year. I know he was the facilitator of your work plan last year, so we've invited him back again to lead that discussion. So with that, I'll hand it over to David.
All right, thanks so much, Nathan. I am very big on making records. I promise you tonight will not be record breaking. We're not going to go past 5 hours, and you all have a hand in making sure that happens. Just to remind everybody, David Graham, Chief Innovation Officer for the city. I now head up the Office of Innovation and Economic Development. Amongst the other things that I do in my job, I do facilitations, innovation sessions with a number of different departments. We're always very forward thinking in things like technology, continuous improvement, organizational improvement, and continuing the great legacy that Carlsbad has on being cutting edge and forward thinking. Thank you all for all of your work and being volunteers in this space. Today, we are going to build upon last year's Traffic and Mobility Commission work plan, and I will lead us through an exercise. Really, this will be as successful as all of you make it, and you made it very successful last time. I think that since we have a document to work off of, it will be abridged, but I will get into that in a minute. Just as far as any times or points that you need me to stop, a visual cue is helpful, so put up your hand. I have obviously breakpoints when it's important, but if there's something that I'm clipping through and you'd like to make a point, listen, this is really all about all of you. This is the work plan that has been created by this commission, and we're reviewing and potentially revising it. And I really appreciate all of your input and support. So with that, unless there's any comments from the chair or any commissioners, I'll get started.
Let's get started.
All right, here we go. Okay, so the first version of the Traffic and Mobility Commission work plan, and for those, I think everybody knows, but this is a newer thing that has come to the city, which is great, and hopefully it helped guide a lot of the discussions, and we'll get into the rationale for a work plan in just a moment. But we're now looking at it for fiscal year 2021, and really making sure that it still is relevant to the work that you're doing, that it is guiding based upon an entire years of input and work, exactly what you want, and that it really reflects what the makeup of this particular commission is. So here we are. We want to be a good sequel, like The Empire Strikes Back. Now, I'm not going to get into any of the arguments about what the first movie was versus the second. I'm a purist, so we're in Empire Strikes Back territory. None of this Phantom Menace business. Okay, so here we go. We're basically going to recap what went on for the FY 19-20 work plan development, and then review that work plan, including the mission statement, goals, and objectives, and revise as necessary, or add additional goals and objectives or revisions. This is the municipal code that basically outlines your duties. I think all the commissioners are very familiar with this, and anything within the work plan must fall within the bounds of the municipal code. We do not have and or any other relevant city codes. The current work plan does, and we have the city attorney on here. If for some reason we begin to move beyond what the municipal code allows, then we will call out of bounds, but that's very unlikely. Y'all know what your job is, and you do an incredible job at it every single day. So we will recognize that some things have changed significantly. In Tom's earlier mention that shockingly, he comes on board and all of a sudden he solved all of the traffic issues in Carlsbad. Great job there. I do want to recognize that Though COVID has really affected a lot of what we're doing as a city, there may or may not be a big impact on your particular work plan, because as things return back to activity, as things continue to reopen, there may or may not be an area that we want to focus on for this particular work plan, but I do want to recognize, and I love this one absolutely, transformation is years away, and my goodness, have we not seen organizations have to rapidly change and transform as soon as COVID-19 started hitting. So who's our audience for a work plan? Why do we have it? Of course, it's the city council to outline. They're the ones that set the goal of having work plans. It is also for the commission to guide your work and help there be a path or a roadmap. Obviously for staff as well, because it lays out the priorities of the commission and those of city council, because the work plan ends up getting blessed by the city council. And then the public. I don't know how many public members are pouring through your work plan. However, anyone that wants to take a look at it can. And I think more importantly, it does help the communication from the city say, these are the things that the commission are working on, that they care about, their goals, their objectives, and a simple way of saying, this is who we are and what we're about. So please keep that in mind as we move forward. The commission did a great job the last go around on this. We did previously start with a discussion of what is the commission value. Now that was an exercise because we were getting at sort of the fundamentals of what the commission at that time cared about in order to develop a mission statement, goals, and objectives. And where we're at now in year 2, I mean, oftentimes work plans go for multiple years, not a single year. I'm not proposing, unless anybody objects, to restart a values discussion. We will talk about what the values are and were, but it's pretty clear that that many of them remain consistent. When we do think about values, though, we're asking, what do we talk about? You know, what is important to us? What brings us together? What guides us in difficulty? And what do we celebrate? So as we think about the threads through your entire work plan, have some of these questions in mind to make sure that what is in the mission statement, goals, and objectives really reflects what your thoughts are about the values of the commission. And it's important to really distinguish between your personal values and the values of this group, this organization. Because there are many things, personal values, that influence us and affect our decision-making, but we're really talking here about what are the collective values of this commission that also sits within the collective values of the city of Carlsbad. So with that, the last set of values included enhancing safe mobility, government transparency, data-driven decision-making, doing the right thing and doing it the right way. Those were the high voted values. And then a commitment to the city of Carlsbad and its residents, as well as being forward-looking. This is what ended up being transformed into the mission statement. Now, you'll remember that we provided advice on using concrete language, being clear about the what and why, understanding the short and long term, thinking about value, inspiration, reasonability, and specificity, and of course, in all things, be concise. Nobody wants to read a war and peace tome for a mission statement. So this is what you came up with. The Traffic and Mobility Commission is committed to enhancing safe mobility for the city and its residents by using data-driven decision-making and a forward-looking approach to transportation. We are transparent and do the right thing the right way. I think that still stands incredibly well. I can tell you that having watched the commission since this work plan was created, what you have done has really continued to reaffirm the fact that this is what is driving this commission. I will pause real quickly and ask the commissioners, and I guess I will use unless there's verbal objection, whether this mission statement still reflects the values of the commission, whether it does not, and if so, should we have a discussion about that? I'm gonna put it back up right now, either through a head nod or if anyone objects, I will invite discussion on the mission statement before we move forward.
Anyone has any comments by objecting or adding to it? No?
And if you want to say you love it, hey, give me a thumbs up or say it's wonderful.
Yes, we love it.
All right, like it. I'm seeing thumbs up, seeing positives. That is a good test of a mission statement that it can last at least 12 months or a year. I don't know how long it's been since the last. So well done, all of you, on that. So we will move forward and begin to think about the value of change versus the value of keeping things the same. Now, nobody wants to be like this. Instead of risking anything new, let's play it safe by continuing our slow decline into obsolescence. Now, I can tell you, having watched this commission and interact with it, this is definitely not where you will be. At the same time, we don't want to change just for change's sake. So if things are relevant, they make sense, we're going to perhaps stick with them. Perhaps there's some tweaks or changes that are necessary. But I will tell you that what I have seen is that this is a very deliberative commission that considers all sorts of evidence when making decisions, but don't be concerned that if something stays the same that it's not relevant. I think there's a lot of things you put in your work plan that remain relevant and are not a slow decline into obsolescence. I'll do a quick reminder of some of the terminology that we used the last time regarding goals and objectives. Now, your goals and objectives are going to be consistent with the mission statement that we had just a moment before. You developed several goals, and underneath each goal, several objectives. Just as a reminder, a goal is generally the broad and more qualitative statement about what the organization or this commission hopes to achieve. And the objective oftentimes is more quantitative or tactical on how you get to that goal. The real difference between the two is one is really about the destination. The other is about the progress needed to get to the destination. It's how you get there along the way. We also did review both the SMART and SMART-er approach to our goals, and you did a phenomenal job in the goal setting with this in mind. So please consider as you're deciding whether to make revisions, whether your objectives and goals are specific. Can you measure progress? Is it attainable? How relevant is it today? What is the time frame? And we're actually in the middle of the last two steps, the evaluation and reevaluation of what you had put together. So let's ask these questions as we think through the goals and objectives and how we want to proceed. Do they still align with the mission? Is it still relevant? Is it achievable? And have we made progress? And that have we made progress to the point that we believe that there need to be revisions? Perhaps we've completed one of the objectives or a goal. I'm thinking about the communications plan in some ways. And if so, is it time to hang the mission accomplished banner? Is it time to tweak or change? So with these thoughts in mind, we'll move a little further into evaluating the goals and objectives. Now, I love this cartoon. Big changes and small changes. Sometimes a small change may have a big impact. Okay, there's a small change. The red bag has the sandwiches. The green bag is your parachute. So that's a big oops. You wouldn't think that the difference in the color of the bag would really matter. In this case, it can have pretty significant consequences. So as we think about change, we want to consider what perhaps small changes may be that could have a big impact as we're dealing with our entire work plan. Now, hopefully you've been a little bit entertained since this is the last item of the day. But if you're not entertained, we are going to employ some Roman rules for how we're determining what to do with the goals and objectives. So the first will be that it is cool and there do not need to be any revisions to it. Second is you like it, but perhaps there's some minor tweaks. And finally, there needs to be a revision or a deletion or a change to a goal or objective. And in so doing, we will work on making those changes. There may also be some that are completed that we can take off the list and say, job well done. So just to provide a legend for that iconography, We'll approve with no revisions, approve with minor revisions, revise or remove, and then some of them will be completed and removed. I will note that depending upon how the discussion goes, we'll determine whether we'll be coming back, and Nate can think about, whether we will bring back the additional changes, but we'll see how the discussion goes and make a decision based upon that. Sound good? Everybody good? Cool. So let's start with goal number 1. The goal was to review staff recommendations on the multimodal transportation system and provide input based on data, best practices, and public input. So with each of these goals, I'm going to open it up to see if there is any proposed change or if everybody likes it. So again, I will use the same, at least especially for the goals, same approach. If there is an objection and revision necessary, please speak up and I'll let the chair manage that. If not, we will continue.
Okay, who has any revisions or any comments on this? No, I don't see anything. Commissioner Johnson?
Earlier in the meeting, I had a question regarding the vehicles miles travels versus the MMLOS. Does that impact this goal? Because it was unclear to me if we're using both methods or one or what.
So Nate, VMT, does this fit under this goal or any of the other goals? Does this commission have the opportunity to review that as that's moving forward? Commissioner, I believe that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, similar to, we're still doing the full multimodal analysis, so I do not see VMT having, an impact on this goal. I think this would still be consistent.
Commissioner
So
Linke has,
sorry.
Commissioner Linke has a comment on it.
Are we just voting on this language or the actual goals in the list?
The objectives will be next. So I have the goals, and then underneath the goals will be each of the objectives as written in the work plan.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't have any comment on this. I would say for Commissioner Johnson that your question will come up in objective 1D, so we can talk about it then.
Okay. Anyone else has comments on objective A? No? So we like it.
All right, so goal number 1 in the bank. Good job. So under goal number 1, there are several objectives. Objective A is to review and provide input on mobility policies, programs, processes, and informational reports, including the growth management program, annual monitoring report, and other reports within the purview of the commission. It would appear to me that VMT and other methods of measuring traffic would fit under this objective.
Commissioner Linke.
So letter D includes the evaluation and monitoring manual that we talked about earlier, and I think that was supposed to include the VMT guidelines, if I'm not mistaken. So on my recommendations, I put it under D. For A, let's see. For A, I was specifying both fiscal year 2018-19 and 2019-20 growth management program monitoring reports. And then one addition I would like to propose here is to review the mobility portions of the capital improvements program. So staff is presenting council with the CIP in a few weeks. And if anything, it seems like that document lays out what the priorities are for mobility projects. And it's something that I think we should look at. We were presented with it, I guess, in February of 2019. That's before I got on the commission, but it seems like that's something that would be useful for us to review because it really lays out the priorities for the capital improvements.
And is that in our purview?
Well, I would say because it's such a key component of implementing the mobility element. It's basically saying what's going to get funded, when it's going to get funded, that it's something that we could at least review. So that's why I'm proposing it.
Right. My only concern is every time we brought up any kind of budget or funding, it was the comment that it was not in our purview. So maybe Nathan or David can clarify that if that's something that it's in our purview.
I think Nathan's coming on this one.
Yeah, sorry about that. So asking about the CIP specifically, as far as my understanding goes, that is part of your purview. Robbie or Tom, I guess, correct me if you feel differently.
So I will chime in.
Yeah.
So I think earlier David Graham had put up what the ordinance states, which is the purview of the commission, and we can certainly go back and refresh our memory on that. And as Chair Gokin had mentioned, with regards to actual budgeting, that is the purview of the council directly. And that is why the presentation of both operating and the capital improvement program budgets are done basically twofold. So the first is usually done in the May timeframe, where there's a preliminary budget on both operating and the CIP that's presented as the preliminary budget. And then it's subsequently then presented for adoption, usually the last week or the last council meeting in June. So I am taking a look at this with regards to this commission does provide a lot of recommendations. Staff takes the commission's input and recommendations into formulating the priorities and also the CIP projects. As a perfect case in point was the first time that we made a presentation on the LFMZ 15 and the projects. I believe it was Commissioner Hunter, if I recall correctly, that was talking about the El Camino Real project from Sunny Creek to Jackspar. At that time, it did exist within the CIP, but it was unnumbered at that time, and it was not slated for funding consideration until FY 25 to 29. So between March and April, staff took a look at it and looked at the priorities and the input that was provided by the commission. We numbered that project, which is now 6094. We really took a look at where we were at and made that recommendation on May 5th to expedite that project to City Council. So the valuable input that we received from the commission is taken into consideration in the CIP budget formulation and development. And so there's a lot that goes into the budget preparation, including opportunity for public input throughout the year, and then a more detailed one that was done in, I want to say it was in March, like March 4th. So then when that is prepared, then it's presented to council. Because of our current situation that was slid, and it's tomorrow, is when the budget presentation will be made to City Council on both the operating as well as the capital improvement program. I think you will be pleased to see that actually a lot of the projects that we have been talking about in the past 6 months or so, you'll recognize them in the portion as we talk about the mobility. So, so I'm just stating that I think timeline-wise, with regards to the budget preparation and presentation, that throughout the year, as we discuss specific CIP projects and your input, it ends up influencing what we recommend in the budget in the May and June timeframe.
So I'm just thinking though that the whole process of implementing the mobility element can't be, you can't exclude the funding of projects from that. We were presented with the CIP, I guess, in February of 2019. It just seems like to get a global overall view, it'd be nice. It's only once a year. It'd be nice to have a global view of where our priorities are with respect to mobility projects, and that would provide that sort of broad perspective for the commission, and it seems appropriate that we would review it given our role.
And what Mr. Frank provided earlier, and it's in your package, is a list of the projects and the status of where we're at. And I think that was a comment that that was made with regards to that. And so, I think it's, you know, CIP is a very, very broad discussion, and so that's, I think, something that we can always make a presentation. And I think you were referencing to the one in February was an informational item with regards to where we're at on different projects. The item that is in the package, today's package, includes information on the CIP. So I think it's just, you know, what is it with regards to where we're at in the CIP budget development process.
So I think that what might be helpful, if there are additions under these, there may need to be a little bit of research that needs to be done. And so what I would ask is for those additions like this, and also perhaps with the city attorney, that we can take the input of the commissioners and under each of these note what items you believe should be incorporated in this. And then we can evaluate whether the objective currently encompasses that, or whether it should be included in the language, if that makes sense, and then come back to the commission and say, here's our recommendation on each of these items. Does that make sense, Commissioner Linke? And then we don't have to get into the debate on in or out. We'll be able to come back with the actual information based upon the requests under each of these that any of the commissioners may have to consider in incorporation.
I think that's a good idea too.
Okay, very good. So then under goal 1, objectives, let me put it back up. Under goal 1, objectives. A, so if there are items, what I would suggest, unless anyone objects, is if you can email Nate with the additional items that you believe should be incorporated under this objective, we will collect all of those, and at a subsequent meeting in the next consideration of the work plan, then we can provide each of those things. You can provide them here so the whole commission can hear them and send that email. We'll also be able to capture them live. So are there any other items under goal 1 objectives that people believe should be considered? If not, I'll move on to B.
Okay, hold on, I gotta see everybody. Okay, do I have any hands? No.
Okay. Under goal 1, objective B, review and provide input on mobility plans currently in process, including the sustainable mobility plan and traffic signal master plan. Are there any additions or revisions to this objective?
Commissioner Linke.
I had a brief conversation with Mr. Bilsey, who does the traffic signal, and he said that the traffic signal master plan is a very technical document, and that he would recommend, and he's probably not here to say anything about it, but that he recommended changing that to traffic signal performance report or something similar. In other words, showing a report showing how well the traffic signal master plan is functioning, as opposed to reviewing the traffic signal master plan itself. So I would recommend we change that to a traffic signal performance report.
Okay, do we have any objections on that from the commissioners? No, okay, so then you can send that in the email to Nathan, Commissioner Linke. Yes.
C, review and provide input on Carlsbad residential traffic management program projects and proposed traffic control devices, such as parking restrictions, speed limits, stop signs, roundabouts, and traffic signal evaluations.
Any comments from the commissioners? No? Okay, we can move on.
Review and provide input on the new mobility systems evaluation and monitoring manual, which may include transportation impact analysis, growth management program, annual traffic monitoring, vehicle level of service, evaluation methods, and multimodal pedestrian, bicycle, and transit LOS evaluation methods. I agree, Commissioner Linke, this would be the place to include Commissioner Johnson's mention of VMT, and it probably could include something along the lines of, and any other evaluation method, something along those lines, to be broad. Nathan, if you can capture that. Commissioner Johnson, does that make sense? Does this look like a good spot for that?
You're muted, Johnny.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Okay, any other comments from commissioners on this item? Commissioner Linke?
So just for clarity, the evaluation and monitoring manual, does that include the transportation impact analysis guidelines and the vehicle miles traveled guidelines?
Yes.
And does it include anything related to TDM?
I'll ask Nathan to respond to that.
No, I don't believe that would contain any TDM elements. So if that's something you wanted to add, we would want to specify that.
Yeah, so go ahead.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. If I could, I would probably recommend that being a E, its own, because this is really about the evaluation and monitoring. Or are you thinking about wanting to evaluate TDM itself?
Well, the reason I included it with this is because all three of those, level of service, VMT, and TDM, all have triggering thresholds and screening criteria that are very similar. So when a developer comes in, they need to address all three of those items sort of in their circulation portion probably of their application. So that's why I linked it in there, but it's fine to have it separate.
Okay. Let's put TDM as a standalone to consider how to make sure that the commission is involved if they may be in the TDM program. That's what I'm hearing you're trying to get at.
Yeah, just an update on TDM and a review
Okay.
of any guidelines, that's all.
Okay, let us take a look and see where that would make sense. Okay. Well, look at that. I think we got through goal number 1, and
E, but I don't know if that ICE, right?
yes, there is E, sorry.
But I don't think anybody has any objection to that.
Do we like the idea of providing opportunities for public input on scheduled city projects that have the potential to improve mobility options? I think we're pretty pro-public and their input. Okay. With that, we've completed goal number 1. Goal number 2, focus on mobility around school locations, including safety. So the same thing here. Does this goal still make sense? Do we need to make any revisions to it? I'll open it up.
So anybody has comments on it? Okay, my only comment is that, is there any way we can be proactive as a commission or maybe a sub-commission, not just reviewing and receiving information from the staff, but actually creating some kind of safe routes to school or something that we can actually get started. And I don't know if Nathan, you're the best one to. Commissioner Linke?
So Commissioners Pensiers and Perez and I are working with Mr. Schmidt and others on the sustainable mobility plan. And one big component of that is safe routes to schools. And I think Commissioner Perez in particular has taken an interest in that part of it. And so I think that's one approach, is that we are doing that as part of the Sustainable Mobility Plan, which is in another part of our work plan.
You feel that this language that we have in goal 2 covers everything we need for mobility around schools?
Looks good to me in conjunction with doing the Sustainable Mobility Plan.
Okay, then I'm good to go on this one. Any other comments on this goal? No, I think we're good then. We can move on to goal 3.
Sorry.
Two objectives. Sorry. Yes, we're getting to the objectives, and Commissioner Gokin, if the commission would like to call out something in an objective, even though it is being covered by the Sustainable Mobility Plan, because it nestles under here, that's a consideration that you may want to think about. So the first of these is to review and provide input on significant mobility and safety projects near schools.
Commissioner Perez?
Yeah, I wanted to just get clarification on the part where we say significant mobility. I think now we're in this COVID and with the Carlsbad Unified School District and trying to understand what the attendance is going to be, meaning actually being in schools. There are many different thoughts on what's going on, nothing executed yet. And, what I'm getting at is, if the children are going to be in a staggered drop off, or if there's going to be a change to, kids not going to the actual school, but going to an ancillary, say like the high schools. I'm just trying to understand if that would be considered significant, and if we have jurisdiction, or if we would be reaching out to, like the Unified School District, if that's in our purview, yeah.
So let me take a look at, let's go to objective B real quick and see what's contained there, and then let's come back to that. Because B is receive informational reports from the Carlsbad Police Department regarding school traffic, education, and enforcement. And those are the only 2 objectives that are under this particular goal. Commissioner Perez and others, what I'm hearing is there may need to be something that is relevant to the existing situation that we're in engaging with the school districts and a review of the jurisdiction of the commission. 2, Chair Gokin, I'm hearing that it would be good to call out a proactive approach of commissioners to and with the schools on all things associated with school mobility and safety. And so I would recommend, if it's the commission's pleasure, that we work on 2 things. 1, what the commission's role is and would be, and 2, what language would be for a objective C and or D that would meet what I'm hearing, and please provide additional input, is more proactivity, recognizing the changed circumstances, at least for some period of time for the school district, and additional engagement similar to what the commission did around some of the public input stuff and communications. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless anyone else has objection or comments. Okay.
All right, so then let us take that proactivity and recognizing COVID and look at a objective C and or D if necessary, and bring that back. Okay.
Commissioner Linke?
So this kind of gets to the dynamic of what can the commission do to be proactive. Like, we can't compel staff to do anything. It's, the priority. I think the Sustainable Mobility Plan sets the priorities, but yeah, if we can do anything to be more proactive, I support that. I just don't know how we do it when we're not allowed to set priorities. We can review them, but we can't set them. We can make recommendations. So when the Sustainable Mobility Plan comes back, we can certainly give our input on how things end up getting prioritized. And then on an extra item on, I was adding an objective C, which we don't necessarily need to add because I saw it on staff's list, and that was encourage the creation of an annual safety-based monitoring program. So like level of service monitoring, but instead based on safety issues like collisions. But I see that staff has, I think, gotten a grant or something that they're going to be doing that. So if they have an update on that program, it'd be nice to see that maybe under this goal too. But I don't know that we necessarily need to add it as a goal since I can see it's being worked on.
I would always recommend that if there's something that's being worked on that can be fit under these goals and it's consistent with your mission statement, that we provide that language here so that if and when it's completed, then that's checked off. I'll leave that to Nathan and team to evaluate whether that makes sense for the objectives and where that would be. And Commissioner Linke, to your overarching point, since the City Council do approve these, it's, though the Commission does not directly compel, the City Council adopts the overall work plan, and that does guide what staff does. So there is a direct relationship between what is recommended by the Commission and ultimately what the decision makers decide. So I think it would be valuable to include these additional items. We'll work on some of the language so that is seen as within the work of the Commission, if it is, of course, consistent with the municipal code.
John has a comment.
Yeah, I like that idea. I just wanted to recommend that a safety report would probably be not school specific. It would include schools, but it would be an overarching safety program. And so I don't know if I would recommend nesting it in under the schools itself. It would probably maybe go better someplace else. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was my poor placement of that under goal 2. Should have probably been under 1.
That was my thought also.
All right, so Nathan, you captured that. We'll put it someplace probably a little higher. Cool. All right.
Okay.
Unless there's any other comments on goal 2 or its objectives, I think we have some clear direction. Thank you very much. Goal 3, develop a commission communications plan. Thoughts?
Commissioner Linke, I know you have something to say.
Actually, I did want to add the language, enhance procedures and transparency. Let's see, or change this goal. Sorry, I'm getting my thoughts in order here. There are 4 objectives here, and we accomplished the first 2, which were focused on developing a communications plan, but we've completed that. So I'm proposing that we change the name of this goal to enhance procedures and transparency. And then that addresses C and D because we've completed A and B, which you'll see when you go through the slides.
We can put a pin in the goal and come back to it after we go through the objectives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it'll make sense that we want to change that once we see what's been completed.
Unless there's any objections from the chair or commission.
No, I don't see any objection.
So the first goal under here is review and consider recommendations to improve the existing communication practice between the commission and the city council. Back to my check boxes. I believe this has been completed. So I would recommend that this be under that mission accomplished banner and removed.
Agreed.
The next is discuss and determine the roles of the chair and commission members in providing in-person input to the city council at city council meetings. I believe this one as well has been completed and gets a check mark. So then we can move into the last 2, which are revise the commission's rules and regulations to be consistent with the communications plan.
And that was completed actually tonight, so that one's also drops off the list.
I was just about to say that. I believe that's the case. So then propose upgrades of the city's, it should be to the city's website to enhance public input related to mobility issues. Discussion?
I am not aware of any action that happened on this item. Unless somebody else knows something that I don't know.
Yeah, I think this one is still pending, and that's why I changed the name of the overarching goal to enhance procedures, and or you could just say enhance transparency, maybe,
So then
or just enhance the website.
And is this an appropriate place to put on working on somehow getting recordings of our meetings?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would like to add that.
I got thumbs up from Commissioner Hunter.
So I'm going to go back to the goal itself. So from what I'm hearing, you really have developed the communications plan, and now it is a question of implementing and upgrading, enhancing, any of those sorts of phrases. Something along the lines of continue to implement the commission communications plan with a focus on transparency, accessibility. Those sorts of things would be some ways of turning this into really an activity goal as opposed to a destination goal. Any thoughts? Because we can take any of your input here and then come back with a revised goal 3 with more of an activity focus than a destination focus.
Comments? Commissioner Linke?
I would just call it enhanced transparency, just a 2-word goal. I think the two that are left, the 2 objectives that are left fall into that, enhancing transparency.
With the addition of the videotaping or recording.
Right, yeah, that's the second of the 2. So upgrading the website and video recordings would be the 2 objectives.
Okay, any objections? No. I think we're good on that one. If Mr. Graham.
Yep, we can work on that. I think it's pretty clear. So, yep, I got it. All right. Well, guess what? That was pretty painless. Great job. Thank you so much. I think it's very consistent with the mission statement. So I do just want to ask the question, and honestly, congratulations in how many of the objectives have been accomplished, have continued to be implemented. You developed some really meaty objectives and have been meeting those goals and exceeding them in many ways. We had talked originally about trying to be efficient with not having too many goals, but of course I do want to ask whether there are any new goals, and I would just suggest to the commission to, when considering whether additional goals are necessary, has sufficient progress been made on the current goals and objectives? I think it's a resounding yes. Has new information led to the need for a new goal? From what I've heard from all of you tonight, new information is informing your approach to the goals and objectives, but perhaps not the need for a new goal. And then, of course, is there capacity to add a new goal? You don't want to go into year 2 setting goals that with such a good track record of achieving them that are outside of the ability to achieve them. So I would open this up to see if there are any additional goals that the commission believe are necessary. And if so, we can work on language for a goal, or perhaps they nestle well underneath the, I think, very well defined goals that you provided earlier.
Any comments? I feel that the goals that we have, they're pretty broad, and we haven't created this long enough that we have a handle like that. We, even though we did achieve, and we did really good this year, by the way, just so everybody knows. I think that for me, this is achievable, and it's something that we can get deeper into and more comfortable with the existing. But if anybody else has any comments or additions? Nope, I don't see any comments.
All right. Well, I just have to say, fantastic job. One of the good tests of a well-developed work plan is one that is multi-year. And what I've seen from the comments tonight primarily are some changes and tweaks or things that you've accomplished and we need to move beyond. So I'm incredibly impressed. Hopefully you're all impressed with yourselves. Thank you to staff for helping support this and for the great direction and leadership. I'm just going to say this. You've done a good job of not being change for change's sake. So you don't want to be Coke Classic and then say, hey, well, let's just change it up and become New Coke. No, we all know how that worked in the 80s. Everybody hated New Coke because, you know, Coke Classic was good. You guys did a good job creating Coke Classic and making sure to stick to it. So I just want to invite any final comments from the entire group and then from Nathan. But as I look at this, really good direction to come back to you with a work plan with options for items to incorporate under several of the objectives that then the commission can make some decisions upon. Revision to the overall goal of item number 3 with a focus on enhancement of accessibility and transparency, particularly recordings and how this is pushed out via the website. And with that, I will thank you for the opportunity to once again work with you and turn it back over to the chair and to Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. I do feel that you were very, very helpful to keep us organized, and I personally feel that we were heard. So I really appreciate your help, and it does make this process way smoother because of your help. I let any other commissioner if they have any comments. Okay, no comments. I'm assuming that we're all good. I got thumbs up, so it's all good in time of the essence right now. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.